Hello, my name is Stephanie Jeans. I'm a psychotherapist and I'm going to be talking to you about sex and pornography addiction. Is it such a thing, or is it just an excuse for bad behavior? How it might start for somebody, how it impacts somebody and people around them, such as partners. Is it treatable? How do we work with it? And it's just going to be a snapshot because I don't have a lot of time, so the different elements that I talk about could be elaborated on enormously. The main goal that I would have here is to generate discourse and discussion. It's a topic that fortunately at the moment is getting a lot of press. There's sort of increased traction with it at the moment, but it's still the sort of topic that sort of gives people the ick in a way, and so the more we can talk about it, I think the more helpful that's going to be going forward, especially for our younger generations, which I will touch on. If I refer to any clients, that's not with a particular person in mind at all. It will be an amalgamation of clients because similar concepts and themes will come up. I also am going to be referring to men. That is not to say women are not addicted to sex and pornography. Of course they are, but it's a lesser amount, and for me personally, my client base is around males, and so that's why I will be referring to that. Now, is there such a thing as addiction? And trying to work out what that is. It's really a behavior that is destructive if it's an addiction. So we're not necessarily talking about high libido. You enjoy a lot of sex, that's absolutely great, but it's when it starts to go wrong, when you engage in risky behaviors, behaviors that clash with your values, behaviors that if they are found out could have absolutely catastrophic consequences for you, and you've maybe tried to stop because you're not feeling great about what you're doing, but you haven't been able to stop, or you can't stay stopped. And the thing about with a sex or pornography addiction is it's secretive. It can be free, it can be 24/7, and you're not ingesting anything into your body. So somebody before too long is going to notice if you are drinking too much, noticing if you're taking drugs, or if somebody's gambling. Eventually that comes to light. But with this, you can hide it for a very long time. And often it's only when somebody is caught that suddenly they start to realize that they might have a problem. So the question is, how does it impact somebody? Well, obviously with partners, it's devastating to be found out, because sex addiction takes many forms. It can be going on chat rooms, voyeurism, exhibitionism, excessive masturbation, pornography, with engaging in risky sexual behaviors. For some people, unfortunately, it means crossing a line into something illegal, and the police come knocking on the door, which is something I'll touch on briefly, and how things can escalate and how they can become damaging. So for instance, somebody could find that the partner next to them just doesn't do it for them, not because they don't have a good sex life with their partner, not because they don't love their partner, but when you are acting out and you're getting a buzz from that, which generally does not last, the real-time person next to you just can't give you the novelty in essence, that is out there. It can impact work. People can just lose themselves in the planning and the build-up to whatever their acting out behavior is. Even with work, some people will be acting out, even in the office, going to the toilet and let's say watching pornography. That happens. It can impact family and friends. You might go home early from something because you're wanting to go home and do whatever it is that you're doing. You might say, I don't want to go out. It impacts mental health. Now, if we're talking about this as a problem, the concept is it is the relationship to sex. So as in, vodka is not the problem. It is what that vodka means to you, what the slot machine means to you, what the heroin does for you. And so that is understanding how it becomes a way of, for example, self-soothing, a way of distracting from what's going on for somebody. It's an outlet. People will describe just literally zoning out, literally. Where did the time go? What happened with that? And the sort of buzz or the pleasurable part tends to come in the planning of something. So if somebody is going on a business trip, they might be planning, right, where am I going to meet up with a sex worker? And all the emails back and forth, the exchange, and then in the act or the meeting up, for instance, that doesn't necessarily feel incredible. Sometimes it does, obviously, but it's the aftermath. It's in that moment afterwards where there tends to be this, oh no, not again, I really need to stop this. And then this very often an attempt to not act out again. And it can be just absolutely engulfing for somebody. So that build up, that buzz. So for instance, with pornography, it's very often the clicking on all the images, on all the clicks, the searching, the constant, we're such curious beings and we hardwired for novelty. So we'll just keep looking and needing more and more and more of something, which is where escalation comes in. And so back to that example of the pornography, somebody will be spending time, for example, downloading, categorizing images, and that is the buzz of it. So you would wonder, why does this become a problem for some people and not for others? How does it begin? Obviously there's opportunity. That's the obvious, but why does somebody who finds dad's stash of porn under the bed, or who goes onto the internet and sees stuff, why does one person maybe pick it up, put it down, and it's not a thing, it's just, hey, everybody does it, we're just looking, it's fine, but it doesn't have any dire consequences, but for somebody else it does. So there's opportunity. There is also potentially for some people attachment issues, which is a massive topic all on its own. So what do I mean by that? As humans, we need connection with other people. And so, for example, if somebody has not had the most secure upbringing, for example, and they might seek validation in other people and feel desirable and have multiple affairs or have a lot of one-night stands, for instance, and that might lead them to feel that's what people like, that's what they see in me, so I am desirable and I am loved, and so that concept can happen. So a securely attached individual is they've got caregivers that they can count on. But if, for example, you've got an ambivalent attachment, then you sort of alternate between really being needy. I need to be with that person, I'm all over them, and then in the next breath it's like pushing somebody away. Really damages relationships. Might withdraw. They've learned that person, that primary caregiver, was never somebody that I could ever count on. They weren't there for me. So let's say a child growing up with an emotionally absent parent because they were an alcoholic or whatever the case may be, and so they've learned to just withdraw, and they find it really hard to engage with another human being. And the thing about these sexual behaviors for so many of people, I see it time and time again with clients, the human being next to you, or if you've never been in relationship before, or you're not currently in relationship, but if you are, there's an intimacy with the person that's right next to you. There's a vulnerability, whereas going online, going into chat rooms, meeting up with a sex worker, having a one-night stand, these are people that, while they are human beings behind all of that, you as a person don't need to engage with that. You don't see them again. So there's a safety in that. Trauma comes into play for some people. So something so trauma, of course, what is trauma? Which is at the base of so much addiction, of course. Trauma is really when you're in a situation and the horror of something that you are completely powerless to. That's the big thing that goes along with trauma. You are powerless. There's nothing that you can do. So if you're being sexually abused, or you're being beaten up or bullied, the devastation of that. And so sometimes with sex addiction and certain behaviors, for example, somebody who was badly bullied or beaten at home might then turn that into a sexual acting out, as in get into quite violent sadomasochistic sex. And they might be, for example, the submissive, and they will say things like, well, I'm in control actually of being hurt, and I'm choosing to be hurt, so it's on my terms. And with that concept, with trauma, everything's about turning trauma to triumph. So you make meaning, you make sense of something by putting it in your own terms and within your control. And then once somebody is hooked, very often, and this is where the problem comes in, the behavior completely escalates until it becomes that thing that is out of control, and you can't stop fantasizing and thinking about the next time you're going to do the behaviors that you do. So at this point, I'd like to talk about pornography. Now, watching pornography excessively is just one sort of branch of sex addiction, obviously, but the reason it gets separated out is it really is just the crack cocaine of sex addiction. And with the internet, that is when the real problems have started to come in for people. Now, as I said earlier, our brains are hardwired to novelty, and oh my goodness, it's just a buffet of whatever you want on the internet, you can find it. So even if you see something that you think, oh God, that's a bit weird, I didn't know that was a thing. There's so many other people out there doing it. Oh, it is a thing. Okay, I'm not strange after all, and what I'm interested in is not strange. If I can just say fetishes, kink, paraphilias, they don't necessarily mean that somebody is addicted at all. They are just clues to somebody and their behaviors, but it's not necessarily that there's addiction there. It's just an unusual sort of sexual interest. So with pornography, it's got the best business model, hasn't it? There are more people searching for pornography than Google, Amazon, Netflix combined. And they're ahead of the game on everything. So they were the first to come up with online payments, subtitles, streaming. When COVID hit, so within a week, for example, Pornhub had made its premium content free to pull in people and to hook people. What that led to, obviously, we all know about the devastating violence against women and children during lockdown, with pornography being, mainly about male domination and female humiliation. But that's, again, another topic all on its own. In no time at all, as you know, with pornography, there are different categories of porn, whatever you can think of. COVID porn. Who'd have thought? As if we haven't had enough of COVID, there's pornography associated with it. Now, the escalation, what happens is we need more of something, and the effect of that doesn't last as long. And so we keep going. And that's when people start to lose hours. They start looking at things that start to cross a line. And it's so sad for some people because they're not searching necessarily for something that's not okay, but people might send them a link. They might end up on groups and chat rooms where people are sharing stuff, or pop-ups. People fall foul to a lot of stuff, for instance, on Twitter, on TikTok, and something, oh, what is that? I didn't know that was out there. And the curiosity in the brain, the serotonins and dopamine, all feel good factors in the brain, and even stuff that becomes really shocking. The shock of whoa, what was that? That anxiety actually can promote an arousal as well. And that's where things can go badly wrong for people. So I will work with offenders or alleged offenders. Just to give a caveat there, I don't work with contact offenders because that's out of my remit, and also in the sort of deviant cycle, how somebody talks to themselves and crosses a line to acting out whatever that behavior might be. For me, that's a step too far. Whereas I can work with somebody who has accessed, let's say, illegal images online, because while there's absolute challenge and accountability, and do you realize that for every image you look at, there's a real-time person out there who is being hurt and badly damaged, and so seeking to understand that, and that's part of the work. Again, with somebody creating and distributing images is not for me. But in that, when people cross a line, the police will come knocking on the door of the family home at really inconvenient times, such as 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, and they will then question you, and they will then seize all of your devices, so the laptop, the desktop, the iPad, the phones, and they will be taken away by forensics to be investigated. And while that is happening, you will be bailed, and you will then have to wait for a court date in the magistrate's court. That can take, depending on the backlog, a year and a half. So a person's really stuck in a limbo. It's literally a nuclear bomb goes off. And during that time, there will be bail conditions, And that will be things like, for example, if you've got children in your home, you'll have to leave the family home. There'll be a social worker involved. Everybody gets questioned. If they're not children involved, but let's say you've been looking at underage child sex abuse images, for instance, you won't be able to have contact with anybody 18 and under 18. And eventually then you will get a Crown Court hearing where you will be sentenced, and either things will be dismissed, or you might get a caution, so you'll still go on the sex offenders register, for example, for 2 years, and again there will be conditions set out for you, or you will get a sentence and it could be custodial. Can I just make one point here that again, hearing it over and over, the police and everyone involved really are working so respectfully with people. They don't come in all guns blazing. They try, everyone, you are accountable, that's why they've come to your door, but they are trying to work in a supportive way. They will phone up the person who's waiting to hear, periodically check on them. When somebody's released from prison, there'll be a specialized officer that is assigned to them to work with them. It's very interesting when people do get caught either by the police or by a partner, how interesting it can be that very often they will say, even while the sword of Damocles is hanging over them, that in some ways they're quite relieved, because then they can start working towards changing behaviors. They knew they weren't feeling great but couldn't quite understand or put their finger on it, and so it can just make the world of difference to somebody, quite strangely. And I'd also like to say that the people that I work with, you tend to think that's the pervert in the trench coat at the playground, and yes, they are out there and they exist, but I'm talking about people who genuinely want to live their best lives and are respected in the community and try to be good people, and this just goes horribly wrong. And one of those things is, like I say, coming back to something like an escalation of behaviors that people then will cross a line. The devastation, of course, for partners can't be ignored when they find out, and the reactions are just understandable. Is it me? Am I not attractive enough for you? I thought our sex life was good. Have you gone off me? It's disgusting what you are doing. You've got a daughter in the house the same age. This is cheating. It's immoral. It's embarrassing. It's humiliating. It's devastating, because it's not something you can just go out with a mate and share what's happened and, my bloody partner has done this, because it's very shaming, unfortunately. And so the partner very often tends to carry it alone. I would always encourage seeking therapy, somebody specialized who understands the impact of the nature of somebody, but just to say that it's about the person building up their own identity. So you are more than a partner, you are more than a wife, you are a sister, you are a mother, you are a marathon runner, you are an artist, you are a colleague. So building up how you feel about yourself, your identity outside of the person and what they've done. And also, it's not about you causing this at all. Obviously, if there are issues in a relationship, hey, there are two sides to a story, and then a third. So there's always accountability in, when people come for the relation therapy and try to thrash things out. But somebody who is caught up fighting addiction, it's not about the person next to them. While there can be contributory factors, in triggers, for example, I've just had an argument and I'm pissed off with my partner, so I'm going to go and drown myself in that behavior, for example. But you also, a person cannot cure this or control it. That is down to the person themselves who is fighting this addiction. Just briefly, to talk about young people, especially around pornography. All the surveys recently saying that, and as far back as in 2016, the NSPCC did a survey, and they found that by age 11 and 12, 90% of young boys had seen pornography. Often it's as young as 8 years old. And if you think, for a young person with a plastic brain and plasticity who is growing up, their education about sex, about intimacy is coming from pornography. If you don't educate your children about sex and relationship and what it looks like, well, the porn industry will. And that's why we've got such devastating reports of impacts. And you can imagine a young person who's never actually been in an intimate flesh blood relationship with somebody else. And that's why you're hearing stories of the Everyone's Invited campaign, and young girls being strangled, spat on, called sluts and whores, and them thinking that is what intimacy and relationship is. The boys thinking that that's what they're meant to do. They're meant to strangle someone. They're meant to do all of that. So it's devastating. There are amazing organizations that help in that. Just as an aside, for example, Culture Reframed, they run a program for parents, one on how to talk to tweens and one on how to talk to teens. So I would definitely suggest having a look at this. So in working with somebody, if you have ascertained that there is an addiction here, what do you do there? So for some people can really work towards a good recovery. For others, it may be forever just like white knuckle moments, fighting urges for the rest of their days, and just is what it is. You keep fighting. But you have to seek to understand that relationship to the behavior, as I mentioned right at the beginning. So you can't just put in strategies, for instance, go and put Covenant Eye on your phone or do X, Y, Z, because if you don't understand the reasons why you are engaging in that behavior, you're not going to be able to stop it for very long. So understanding how you got to that point, you will then look at triggers that somebody has. So for instance, you need to understand your thinking and the process if you're going to intercept. So for instance, are you frustrated? Are you bored? Are you lonely? Are you pissed off? Are you, that alone in the house is a big one. The door closes, click, the door's shut, my partner or my parents have left the home, I've got time and opportunity on my hands. So whatever the reason is, you need to, because people are always going to have those emotions. You're always going to feel stressed at some point, or depressed, or whatever the case may be. So if you don't learn to regulate those emotions and work more efficiently with them to manage them, well, then how are you going to just not go acting out? So we need to regulate them to find healthier ways of managing. So yeah, working out the triggers and then putting strategies in place, working out your motivations, writing yourself a letter. What do I have to lose? Which is pretty much everything. If this behavior happens again, there are blockers that you can put on. Routine helps a lot of people, and there are many things you can do. Now, obviously, anyone can get around everything if they put their mind to it, but the reality is the more things, levels of deterrent that you have in place, the more conscious decisions you have to make to go and act out. So that's why the more things you have in place, the better. And at the core of all of this work, which is the base level of any counseling work, is to work with an empathy and a compassion. So my sort of mantra would be that I separate out the person who's okay, unless you are a sociopath who has no empathy or remorse, and then that's not my remit. But the person who is okay with the things that a person does that might not be okay. And so there's a very clear distinction. So you can help working on shame reduction. Bit of shame's okay because that is telling us something is not right. But in essence, to reduce that shame, because otherwise a person's going to be very defensive, and I can't go there. I can't think about that. It's not me. So, and also I believe in education, psychoeducation, being generous with knowledge with people and with clients, again, to help them combat what goes on for them. So yes, that's a snapshot of the work, and I hope it's just given you some food for thought. So keep the conversation going, and if you've got any questions, by all means contact me and I will get back to you. And most of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for taking the time to listen.